The war was supposed to be over. For a brief moment, humanity had believed the Kethri Dominion was content with their spoils, that the fractured treaty signed after the Orion massacre had meant something. But now, deep space relays carried an urgent message. A Kethri invasion force was coming. A fleet so massive that the human military had no chance of meeting it in open battle. The unified naval command sat in cold silence. The War Council chamber, a windowless vault within the orbital fortress Hecaton, reeked of sweat and frustration. Admiral Stain's voice was a low growl. "We can't stop them. Not conventionally." Seated at the far end of the table, Captain Elias Voss exhaled slowly. "Then we don't fight conventionally." Every eye turned toward him. Voss was not a conventional officer. His record was a tapestry of disciplinary actions and victories in equal measure. He had once turned a hopeless engagement into a decisive win by forcing an enemy fleet to fire upon its own refueling station. His reputation was that of a commander who saw possibilities where others saw only defeat. Elaborate, Admiral Stain said. Voss leaned forward, hands clasped. "If we meet them in force, we lose. But what if we convince them they're already outmatched? We don't have the ships to fight, but we can make them believe we do." General murmurs of skepticism rippled through the chamber. Commander Raylan Holt, seated beside Voss, exhaled sharply. "You're suggesting psychological warfare?" "I'm suggesting we send just one ship." The room fell into stunned silence. Voss let the weight of his words settle before continuing. "We deploy the Nemesis, alone, to the Erebus system. We use deception, electronic warfare, and tactical misdirection to create the illusion of an entire fleet waiting in ambush. If the Kethri believe they're walking into a trap, they'll hesitate. And hesitation buys us time. One ship." Holt shook his head. "That's suicide." Admiral Stain tapped his fingers against the table. "Nemesis is a dreadnought, but it's still just one vessel. A vessel designed for this exact kind of warfare," Voss countered. "Stealth capabilities, adaptive jamming suites, next-gen holographic projection. If any ship can pull this off, it's Nemesis. We make the Kethri believe they're facing overwhelming force. If they hesitate, we strike fast, hit key command ships, and make it seem like the opening shots of a much larger battle." General Tarek Vasquez, a grizzled war veteran, scoffed. "And if they call the bluff?" Voss met his gaze evenly. "Then we die. But we take as many of them with us as possible." Silence again. But this time it was different. The officers weren't rejecting the idea outright. The grim reality was that they had no better options. Stain inhaled deeply, then turned to the assembled command. "Objections?" Holt's jaw tightened. He wanted to argue, but what was there to argue? After a moment he muttered, "No objections." The others followed, one by one. Stain exhaled. "Then it's settled. Captain Voss, you have your mission." Nemesis, 18 hours later. The warship cut through the black, like a predator, silent and watchful. Its dark hull bore no markings, its profile designed to absorb sensor scans rather than reflect them. Captain Voss stood on the bridge, hands folded behind his back. The crew was quiet, efficient. They knew the stakes. Commander Holt stepped up beside him. "We're committed now. No turning back." Voss nodded. "That was true the moment we left Hecaton." Holt hesitated before speaking again. "You ever think maybe we push our luck too much?" Voss let out a quiet chuckle. "Luck is just probability in disguise. And probability favors those who plan accordingly." Holt exhaled. "I hope you're right." From the weapons station, Lieutenant Orion Drake turned in his seat. "Captain, we're nearing the Erebus system. Should we deploy stealth protocols?" "Not yet," Voss said. "If we're completely invisible, the Kethri will be suspicious. We need them to see something, just enough to make them uncertain." Drake nodded and turned back to his console. The Kethri thrived on certainty. Their doctrine was built on overwhelming power, on knowing they outmatched their enemy. Voss was about to take that certainty away from them. His eyes flicked to the main display, where sensor readings were beginning to paint a terrifying picture. The Kethri fleet was already here, and it was even larger than expected. A vast armada of Crimson warships, bristling with weapons, hovered like a storm on the edge of the system. The lead vessel alone dwarfed Nemesis by a factor of 10. Holt stiffened. Damn it, Voss. We should have brought reinforcements. Voss didn't blink. Reinforcements would have died alongside us. Holt clenched his fist but said nothing. Voss turned to the crew. His voice was calm, steady. All stations, prepare for engagement. We begin the deception now. Drake, initiate Phase 1. The weapons officer's fingers danced across his console. Executing, the Nemesis pulsed a signal. A carefully fabricated distress beacon, expertly manipulated to appear as though it were coming from multiple locations at once. Then, a series of false sensor echoes bloomed across the void, mimicking the telltale signatures of dozens of human warships. It was a lie, but it was a good lie. On the screen, the Kethri fleet hesitated. Their formation wavered slightly. Doubt crept into their movements. Voss watched it unfold with the cold patience of a hunter. Holt exhaled. I can't believe they're actually buying this. They're not buying it, Voss murmured. Not yet. But they're reconsidering their approach. And that's enough. The first part of the battle was already won. Now came the hard part. The Nemesis drifted through the Erebus system's outer edge, a shadow among dying stars. Around it, the illusion held, for now. Fabricated fleet signatures flickered across enemy sensors. False distress beacons whispered ghostly warnings through encrypted channels. The Kethri fleet loomed ahead, a storm of crimson hulls hanging in cold formation. Their hesitation was evident, a fracture in their once unstoppable momentum. But fractures could mend. On the Nemesis bridge, Captain Elias Voss stood unmoving, his gaze fixed on the tactical display. Commander Raylan Holt was at his side, arms folded tight across his chest. They're stalling, Holt said, voice low. Processing. Analyzing. Voss nodded. Good. The moment they're sure it's a trick, we're dead. We need to give them something real to sink their teeth into. From the weapons station, Lieutenant Orion Drake glanced over. You want to attack? Not directly. Voss turned. We need a scalpel, not a hammer. Something to confirm their worst fears. A silence stretched over the bridge as the Kethri armada shifted. Their largest warship, a Leviathan-designated Harkowin's Fong, began moving forward, scanning the void for inconsistencies. They're searching for the fleet, Holt muttered. Voss inhaled slowly. Then, Drake, bring the Nemesis around to Vector 220. Put us at their 5 o'clock, 60,000 clicks out. Full stealth. Aye, Captain. The Nemesis tilted into a slow arc, shifting position. Its hull plating darkened, absorbing every stray particle of light. The ship became nothing, a ghost in the void. Voss turned to his XO. They expect a large force. Let's give them one. We make them bleed just enough to panic. Holt's expression darkened, but he gave a reluctant nod. He had long since learned that arguing with Voss during battle was like shouting into a storm. Voss stepped forward. Drake, target the Kethri reconnaissance corvette, the Vokrail. Disable her engines. Drake's fingers flew over his console. Locking in, Voss exhaled, pulled the trigger. A single pulse round fired from the Nemesis, invisible to naked sensors, but laced with an energy signature resembling orbital railguns from a heavy battlecruiser. The round slammed into the Vokrail's stern, detonating with precision. The corvette shuddered, blue flame spewing from its ruined propulsion system. It was a surgical kill, a perfect wound, one that told the Kethri exactly what Voss wanted them to believe. On the main display, the enemy fleet reacted instantly. The Harkowin's Fong halted mid-advance, broadcasting orders. 2 Kethri battlecruisers swung wide, positioning defensively, as if expecting additional strikes. Their hesitation spread like a virus. Holt exhaled. They think a capital ship took the shot. They think a fleet took the shot, Voss corrected. And then, Captain, Drake's voice cut through the air. Enemy scout ship just broke formation. It's burning hard toward our position. Voss tensed. Damn, the Kethri were testing the waters. One ship, sent to probe the dark. We can't let it report back, Holt warned. Voss's mind raced. Destroying the scout outright would confirm something was lurking. Letting it scan would do worse. He needed an alternative. Drake, prepare a static pulse. Disable its comms. Holt, get me a false transmission. Something that suggests infighting. Holt's eyes flickered with understanding. He nodded, already working. The Nemesis pulsed a directed EMP burst, lancing across space. The Kethri scout ship's comms flickered and died. And then Holt activated the falsified transmission. KSS Reclaimer, cease fire. You're striking friendlies. Disengage, damn it, who authorized this dash? The Kethri scout hesitated. Confusion rippled through the enemy fleet. Voss didn't smile, but a flicker of satisfaction burned in his chest. Pull us back, he ordered. Nice and slow. The Nemesis drifted away, silent once more. The Kethri scout lingered, its captain likely drowning in uncertainty. Had they intercepted an actual transmission? Was there a splinter in the supposed human fleet? It didn't matter. Doubt was a seed. Fear would do the rest. Drake let out a slow breath. That was close. Holt wasn't convinced. They'll realize the deception sooner or later. They will, Voss agreed. His eyes flicked back to the Harkowin's Fong, which had stopped advancing entirely. But later is all we need. The Kethri's hesitation meant only one thing. They feared the unknown. Voss was going to make sure that fear swallowed them whole. The Nemesis hung motionless in the void, its dark hull blending into the emptiness. Every light on the bridge had been dimmed. Every active system calibrated to emit as little energy as possible. The deception was working, but not for long. Captain Elias Voss studied the tactical display, his mind a battlefield of calculations. The Kethri fleet had stalled, their advance uncertain. They had begun relaying cautious messages across encrypted channels, their commanders debating the unseen enemy that lurked in the dark. But hesitation was a fleeting commodity. The Kethri were brutal, but they were not fools. They'll figure it out soon, said Commander Raylan Holt, voice grim. They've been sitting idle for 7 minutes now. That's an eternity in fleet warfare. Then we make them sit for another 7, Voss replied. Holt shot him a look. You can't just keep bluffing forever. Voss half smiled. I don't need forever. At the weapons station, Lieutenant Orion Drake spoke up. Sir, enemy fleet is repositioning. They're shifting into a wide formation, spreading their sensors. The worst-case scenario. They suspected the deception. The Kethri High Commander had made his move methodical and precise. Instead of charging blindly into an ambush, the Kethri would sweep the system, unraveling the illusion thread by thread. Holt's fingers tightened into fists. Damn it, Voss. If we're going to act, it has to be now. Voss exhaled. Time for the second layer of the illusion. Drake, initiate Phase 2, he ordered. The weapons officer nodded, activating a series of holographic ghost ships. Carefully crafted sensor phantoms designed to mimic the presence of a human battle group. On Kethri scanners, half a dozen false vessels flickered into existence, emerging from the void in staggered intervals. Each carried a distinct weapon signature, a fabricated life support system, even simulated comms traffic. On the tactical display, the Kethri fleet stiffened. Holt's eyes widened. They're buying it. Not completely, Voss murmured, but enough to keep them second-guessing. The Kethri High Commander, wary of the sudden surge of enemy signals, had halted his forces yet again. The Armada pulsed with activity, relaying data, attempting to verify what their sensors were telling them. Indecision, delay. That's all we need. And then, Captain, Drake's voice snapped across the bridge. Enemy warship via Rectal is scanning with deep band analysis. They're trying to verify the phantoms. Voss cursed under his breath. The Kethri had finally stopped reacting to fear and started thinking critically. If they finished that scan, the illusion would be exposed. We need a distraction, Holt pressed. Something real this time. Voss already knew. He turned to Drake. Lock weapons on Harkowin's Fong. The weapons officer froze. Sir, that's their command ship. I know. Voss's voice was steel. Lock on and prepare to fire. Holt's breath hitched. Voss, if we hit their flagship, they'll retaliate with everything they have. That's exactly what we want. The Harkowin's Fong was the heart of the Kethri formation. If it suffered a sudden, precise attack, their commanders would have no choice but to assume they were under fire from an actual human fleet. They would react out of anger and panic, not logic. Drake's fingers hovered over the fire controls. Weapons hot. Voss held his breath. Timing was everything. 3 seconds. 2. Fire. The Nemesis unleashed a coordinated missile strike, the warheads mimicking the launch signatures of a Terran heavy cruiser squadron. The bridge went deathly silent as the weapon slammed into Harkowin's Fong, detonations blossoming along its armored hull. A calculated wound, deep enough to demand immediate retaliation, but not enough to cripple. And the Kethri reacted exactly as expected. The entire fleet surged forward, weapons primed, firing wildly into the void. They weren't scanning anymore. They weren't thinking anymore. They were fighting ghosts. Holt let out a quiet breath of disbelief. They think they're under full assault. Voss gave a slow nod. Now the real battle begins. The illusion had become reality. One ship, one shot, one victory. The Nemesis drifted in the void, a predator lurking in the wreckage of its own deception. The Kethri fleet, once an unstoppable force, had fractured. Fear had done what firepower could not. But Captain Elias Voss knew the illusion was crumbling. The Kethri were regrouping. Their sensor phantoms had begun fading, false fleet signals eroding under deep band scans. And as the lie unraveled, the truth would become terrifyingly clear. There was no Terran armada. There was only one ship. Commander Raylan Holt exhaled sharply, staring at the tactical display. We're out of time, Voss. They're recalibrating their scans. Another minute, maybe less, and they'll see right through us. Then we don't give them another minute, Voss said. His voice was calm, but his steel-blue eyes burned with purpose. Lieutenant Orion Drake turned from the weapons station. You want to run? Voss shook his head. We finished this. Holt frowned. How? We've stalled them, but the moment they figure us out, we're dead. We need an exit strategy. Voss's eyes flicked to the Harkowin's Fong, the Kethri command ship. Even damaged, it still pulsed with authority. Its presence held the entire fleet together. If they had any hope of escaping, if they had any hope of breaking the Kethri war machine permanently, there was only one move left to make. Kill the beast. He turned to Drake. Arm the railgun. The weapons officer's fingers hesitated over the controls. Sir, that's a dreadnought. I know what it is, Voss said, voice cold. One shot, direct to the core. Can you make it? Drake inhaled, exhaled. His hand steadied. Yes, sir. Holt's jaw tightened. Voss, if we do this. We don't get another chance, Raylan. Voss faced him, voice quiet but unshakable. The moment they realize what's happening, they'll hunt us to the last atom. But if we take out their command ship, their entire formation collapses. We don't fight the fleet. We break it. Holt's throat bobbed. Then, finally, he nodded. Drake. Aye. Captain. The killing blow. The Nemesis accelerated, cutting through the debris field. The Kethri fleet remained paralyzed by its own uncertainty, still chasing shadows while the real threat closed in. Harkowin's Fong loomed ahead. its hull scarred from earlier attacks, but its reactors still pulsing strong. "Bringing up targeting solutions," Drake said. "We'll need to get within 50,000 clicks for a guaranteed kill shot." "Make it happen," Voss ordered. The ship surged forward, engines burning hot, but masked beneath the chaos of Kethri comms interference. Every second was a gamble. Then, "Captain," Holt's voice snapped across the bridge. "They've found us." The Kethri cruiser via Rectal had broken from the formation, scanning the void with precision beams. Its weapons flared to life, energy signatures locking onto the Nemesis. They knew. "They're moving to intercept." Drake shouted, "They'll fire any second." "Not if we fire first," Voss cut in. "Drake, dump our remaining ordnance at the cruiser. Blind their targeting sensors." Drake's hands blurred across the controls. A spread of decoy missiles and EMP bursts scattered from the Nemesis, detonating in a storm of static and interference. The Kethri cruiser reeled, blinded for a precious moment. It was all they needed. "Take the shot!" The Nemesis railgun fired. The hyper-accelerated tungsten round lanced through the void, traveling at relativistic speeds. Shields were meaningless. Armor was irrelevant. The Harkowin's Fong never had a chance. The round punched through its reactor core. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, a brilliant explosion ripped through the dreadnought, a chain reaction of collapsing energy fields and detonating fuel lines. Fire and debris consumed its hull as the monstrous warship fractured apart in a spectacular display of annihilation. On the Nemesis bridge, silence. Then Holt whispered, almost disbelieving, "We did it." The collapse. The Kethri fleet faltered. Their command structure had evaporated in an instant. Battleships, cruisers, and corvettes hesitated, waiting for orders that would never come. Conflicting signals flooded their comms. Confusion, paranoia, and then the inevitable. They turned on each other. Drake let out a quiet, stunned laugh. "They think they were betrayed." Voss exhaled, his hands unclenching from the armrests. "Good." Holt watched as the Kethri fleet tore itself apart. Warships fired on one another in blind retaliation, their confusion spiraling into all-out mutiny. The remnants of their once unbreakable armada were shattering before their eyes. "Captain," Drake said, his voice lighter now. "Exit vector plotted. We're clear to leave." Voss gave a final glance at the chaos unfolding behind them. A single ship had done this. "Take us home," he ordered. The Nemesis turned away, disappearing into the void, leaving nothing but fire and ruin in its wake. End of story.